This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Northwest Writers Guild. We've got a special treat today because it's the first of what we're going to call our little mini fests, where we focus on a particular. And I'm going to mute Margaret there. Okay. And let's see, I'm muting a few people. I've got to do everything at once here, so don't mind me. But we're so happy to have Janet and Chris and Elena with us because they have spent years writing their books, and we're glad because they're very good at it. And I sound like I'm surprised, but I shouldn't be. I mean, they know what they're doing, actually. And we hope to have some other mini fests in the future with different genres, but I'm glad we're starting with mysteries because it is one of my favorite all-time genres. And we have with us Janet Newton, Chris Bieker, and Elena Taylor. Should I just skip the Hartwell in the middle there, Elena? Okay. And they've all written it prolifically. And I'm going to, before we even get into all this, I'm going to show you a screen share of something that I think is fantastic. And if I can get it, this is their list of books. And I want you to see, when I say they're prolific, I mean they're prolific. And I'll add one to Chris's list. She's working on her fourth novel now, and it's supposed to come out soon too. So I don't know what she's going to feature in that book. Is it going to be another? You're muted, Chris, so you can unmute if you'd like. Is that going to be another in the same series?
It is in the same series. There are some major differences, but a lot of the same primary characters with a few new additions.
Cool, cool. Well, I'm going to leave that up on here, and you won't see it, but it's available for us to look at real quick if we need. And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Chris. I'm kind of interested in, I remember, and I wish I could remember her whole name, but remember the gal, Tony, that was the head of the Washington State, what is that?
Master Gardeners.
Master Gardeners.
Yes.
And there's a reason why she was connected to Chris. And you'll figure that out when you hear about her books. But the introduction, for some reason, they felt that she should introduce Chris to me. So I got this email and it says, I want you to meet Chris Bieker, who's writing these wonderful books. And at the time, she said you were writing the one. And I'm going to let you go ahead and take over this conversation, okay?
Thanks, Linda. This being April Fool's Day, I should probably start with a joke, but my April Fool's career was cut short as a child when I put salt in the sugar bowl and my dad put salt in his coffee. So I wasn't very funny for a while. But I like mysteries, and it's my favorite genre as well. I like to read a lot of other things too, but mysteries are at the top. And I especially like humorous mysteries, and so that's what I write. And the other reason it's what I write is because the creation of a detective, Rex Begonia, was the beginning of my journey as an author. I kind of think of myself as an accidental author. What I mean by that is that I didn't aspire to a career of writing books, but I was actually a writer, just a different kind of writer. My background was more in journalism, news writing. I had written and edited newspapers in college and high school, and actually worked at my local newspaper when I was in high school. And then I continued I studied natural resources, but continued with public relations. So writing news releases, speeches, content for websites, all that sort of thing. But it's very, very different than writing fiction, as I learned. So I have, like Linda said, written 3 books. It started with Murder at Manitou and The Detective Rex Begonia, who's near and dear to my heart. So my journey to becoming a real author, I think, actually happened after I wrote the book. So it started with a story that I was actually making up to tell Tony Fitzgerald. And when I retired, I took a challenge of turning this story into a book. And so that required learning more about, well, how do you get a story out of your head onto paper or an ebook or whatever. And so I took classes, went to things like the Get Lit Festival here in Spokane. The library has workshops, various things. But again, it was just like a one-off Murder at Manitou. And the reason was to fulfill this challenge. But then something funny happened along the way, and people requested more stories. And so that's how I became an accidental author. And I did then start becoming more serious about it. So I joined things like the Guild here and the Pacific Northwest Writers Association. I started reading books by on writing by Stephen King, Anne Lamott, various others. Just did a number of things to improve my craft. And that led to the next 2 books, Blood on Bloomsday and High Stakes at Hoop Fest. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of a theme going on here. My stories take place in Spokane. They're lighthearted and humorous. But then I kind of hit a wall. I started writing the 4th one. And I was really enjoying being part of the writing community and doing author events and that sort of thing. And I don't know if it was the craziness of what's going on in the world. It became hard to focus. I'm not sure what it was, but I hit a wall, and some of you can probably relate to that. So what I did, I stopped and I started doing some other things like writing short stories and journaling. And I went to the Pacific Northwest Writers Association conference last fall. And one of the speakers there really said something that meant a lot to me. And he talked about the joy of creating. And that really resonated with me because I had been starting to question why I was even writing. Was I writing for myself? Was I writing for others? But it really comes down to the joy of creating. And I hope that those of you here that write feel that too. Just think about taking something that did not exist in the world and the next, within months or years or however long it takes, it exists. But one day it didn't, and then it did. And to me, that's just so joyful. It's like planting a seed and watching it grow and bloom. And so now I am wrapping up the last chapter of the first draft of this 4th book, and feeling really good about it. And so the next step will be the editing and all of that, which is also hard, but it's a lot of fun. The hardest part is that first draft. One thing I wanted to say that I think is really important for those of, if there's others like me that are accidental authors, with that first book, before I did publish it, I sent the first chapter to a couple of different contests because I wanted feedback from people who were not friends or family, and could tell me if I was, if this was really something people wanted to read, because it is kind of quirky humor. And I didn't know if that would resonate. And so I think it's really important to get feedback from people that have nothing, they don't really care whether they're nice to you or not. And be willing to listen.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. It's funny because something about what you said made me suddenly realize what I've been doing all these years with the guild. I'm a midwife. Till now, I just didn't know it. So thank you very much. I appreciate that, Chris. How about we go with you, Janet? You've got a lot.
Okay.
You've written 9 whole books.
Yes, 9, and the 10th one will be out this summer.
Ooh.
So I'm working away at them. And so I love that phrase, joy of creating. Chris, that really resonates with me too, because that's why I write. I love to do it. It's a hobby for me. It's not a career. It's a hobby. It's how I spend the cold winter months. And so my journey, you want my journey here, so I guess so. I always had stories in my head when I was very young. I had sleepovers in the barn with my sisters and my brother, and I would tell them the Bill and Mr. Black stories, which they loved. And so that was kind of my start. I was probably 7, 8, 9 years old back then doing that. And then I got busy with my career and I continued to write, but it was short stories, poetry, that kind of thing. And then the last few years of my career, I had some free time. My kids were grown up and I started writing novels, none of which I've even tried to publish or thought about publishing. So my writing career or writing journey really started when I retired. And I think that's pretty common with a lot of people. I retired in 2005 and I joined the Writers Guild right away. And I thought, now what am I going to write? I needed to have something that was a real focus for me. And what I love to read is British murder series. And I know that other American authors write British murder series. And I thought, if they can do it, I can do it. So I looked for a setting that was close to nature, that had a history of folklore type things. I wanted a thin place, and I found that in the little village of Langanog. So I write the Langanog Murders. It's a British murder series set in the tiny little village in North Wales. Where a surprising number of crimes occur. I don't know why in those little villages, but sometimes they do. So my detective, Will Cooper, works out of North Wales Major Crimes, and he's often assigned to the eastern part of the district where Langanog is, and that makes him happy because he has a love interest there. Her name is Bronwyn, and she lives in the village, and she works at the counseling center nearby. And she helps him out with clues that she gets from unconventional sources. So that's kind of my little mysticism part of my books. What you might not know about Wales is that it's a country with a long tradition of folklore. So the national symbol is the dragon. And just last week, I stumbled on another article on Facebook that was from a man who has a PhD from the University of Bristol. And he writes things like the fairies of the Tanat Valley. And very serious about that kind of thing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read you a little quote from his paper because it explains a lot about my books. So Wales is a thin place for sure, where the spirits of old still walk the quiet hills and valleys, where it's possible to feel the connection between what came before and what is now, between us and nature. And so that little blurb is really the central theme in my books. They have murders in them, but they also have romance. They have family and workplace drama. They have a little bit of philosophy and just a tiny, tiny light touch of mysticism that is Welsh culture. So I love writing my books. I can't wait to see what happens next with my characters, and that keeps me going. And I do get comments from readers that say your books bring me peace, or your books describe a life that I knew growing up, but I don't know anymore. And I really like to return to that kind of a life. I guess I would call them cozy, although the murders aren't cozy, but I tend to not be real detailed in the darker parts of murder. So I guess that's what I do. And I write for them and I write for me. And I'm really a hobby writer. I write because it's just fun for me. It's fulfilling for me. And I feel happy when I'm creating. So that joy of creating is here for me. Do you want us to talk about our books, our latest book, or no, Linda? Later?
Probably, yeah, I think that'll come up again.
Later? Okay. Well, then I'm going to turn it over to Elena, I think, unless you have a question for me.
Well, I was gonna say that I have to tell you that I have frustrated Janet for a long time because every time I describe her books, I call them historical fiction. You just look at them and just, no.
No, they're not. They're not historical. They're modern. They take place in the modern world, but in a very ancient part of the country where the buildings are ancient and the beliefs are still held on to. So I,
That stuff you talk about, the mystical aspects and the
yeah,
history of that area. It's like the past speaks to you through your book. It really it does. And so
it
that's
does.
something that hung up on that. But anyway, thank you, Janet.
It's interesting. The people there still hold on to those beliefs and those traditions. And I had I had a bed and breakfast hostess who said, "Oh, you went to Beaumaris Castle. Did you hear the ghosts in the chapel? Because they're there." And they really do still hold on to those things. And it's that was important to me when I was choosing a setting for my books. So there you go.
I think that's why they insist that it's historical fiction. Okay, so
You can call it that if you like.
Elena, there you are
Hi, Linda.
to say.
I thought that I would spend a little bit of time talking about the three different genres that I write in, because a lot of times writers, one, they're wondering how important is it to sort of know your genre or stay in your genre? What happens if you kind of bounce around? So I thought I would talk a little bit about that evolution. So I started out I was a playwright, so that's a very different animal. And if anybody's interested in that, I can talk about that another time. But for today, my first novel, I started out writing funny private eye. So I always like to say that my character, Eddie Shoes, her name is Eddie Shoes, she's the love child between Kinsey Milhone and James Rockford. Because that really is sort of where the evolution of that character was for me. I grew up watching James Rockford as a young kid, and Sue Grafton, who wrote the A is for Alibi, B is for Burglar, what we call the Alphabet series, was the first author I found by myself. I had been reading a lot of mysteries that my grandmother had introduced me to, Tony Hillerman and Agatha Christie, but I found Sue Grafton on my own. And so I was a huge fan, and it felt sort of natural to work on a first novel in that vein. So one of the things I really love about a funny PI is that you have a lot of flexibility with reality in certain ways. So while I did do a lot of research about how private eyes work, and my character has the credentials and follows the rules, her mom is actually the wild card. The private eye itself does follow the rules. When you're writing comedy, you can kind of push on that suspension of disbelief for people. Because in reading a funny murder mystery, right, we can kind of go with the fact that things might not be how they are in the real world. We read them for escapism. We read them to enjoyment. They're fun and they're funny. Like Janet, my books are not cozies because my character's a professional. Cozies require to be a traditional cozy, they have to have a amateur sleuth. But I have a lot of crossover in my first series, so there's no graphic violence, there's no graphic sex, all any kind of murder is off the page, or touched on as opposed to graphic. And so I started with those. And it was delightful to work on a series. My plays had always been very serious. And so it was very fun to have that sort of break. But I found myself returning to a darker, more serious, because the other thing I like to read is police procedurals. And so my second series, the Sheriff Bet Rivers series, was kind of a return to these darker, more atmospheric books. And that series, the Sheriff Bet Rivers, is a sheriff in a small rural community. And one of the things that I work very hard on is getting my police stuff accurate. Um, Obviously, it doesn't track exactly how things are in the real world. I don't have my readers wait 6 months for DNA results to come in. I don't make my readers wait, a year for the tests, the DNA tests to work their way through, which is how real world police work happens. It can take a year or two or more for a case to go through. So obviously, I condense time, but my sheriff behaves the way cops should, right? And it's important to me to have that accurate. And so it's a more controlled, in a sense, it's more control for me in the world that I'm building, because I am looking for that accuracy. And I'm not asking people to suspend a lot of disbelief. And so it's a different world than writing the comedy stuff. I have a police officer. He's phenomenal. He's Italian. He started out in the military, has worked drug cases, undercover, DEA. He has been in the United States for 20 years. He's done major crimes, homicide detective. He's also been, I love this, the cop at the school. In the Issaquah School District. He's been the cop at the high school. So he really has a vast experience in all kinds of aspects of being a police officer. And so for those books, and Kill to Keep, which comes out in July, is the third in that series, I run all my cop stuff past him and I say, is she, doing this accurately? And we have a little rule, always, maybe never. If I say, do I have this accurate? And he says, yes, we would always do that. Then I make sure that that's in the book, that's how she does it. If he says we would never do that, then I have to rewrite the scene, right? I have to figure out a way to get what I needed for the character to do and for the mystery to move forward. But I have to find a way to do it which actually accurately represents what a police officer would do. So those are always a tricky one. But if he says maybe, if he says, yeah, maybe you could do that, then I get to keep it because it's close enough for fiction. We never want to be so accurate that we make our stories boring, right? We do want to have that dramatic effect. Then my most recent release, The Haunting of Emily Grace, which came out in November, is suspense. And suspense is a completely different animal from either Private Eye or from police procedurals. And the reason for that is sort of twofold. One is there actually isn't a body. There is no investigation of a crime, right? With suspense, it's the idea that a crime could happen. It's that your protagonist could be in danger. And then because there's a little sprinkling of paranormal in this particular novel, there's also, I get to create whatever world I want. So I have the most flexibility with suspense. I don't have to follow the rules of the police officers. I don't have to follow the rules of a private eye. And even more importantly, because there's some paranormal, I don't even have to follow real world environment. I can choose to insert things which are fantastical. So those are sort of the three genres that I work in and am working in. Linda, do you have any questions? You're muted though.
Noticed.
Can you hear me now?
I'm going to go back to Janet then, because I would like to hear a little bit about um, I don't want to say a similarity. There's a feeling about all your books that there's a continuity with the characters. And what are your books like? I mean, you're writing differently. You're in a different country, different setting. What would you say about your books then, and particularly your newest one, number 9?
I'm not sure what you're asking. uh, they are basically police procedurals. Um, and like Elena, I researched that quite a bit. The rules are different in the UK than they are here. So I have to, I can't depend on my brother-in-law, who was a sheriff, to tell me, yes, you could do that, and no, you can't do that. I really have to research things. My questions, can this happen over there? Or what are the police ranks? Or how do they do things? So really, that is what they are. Bronwyn, the other character, is really immersed in the natural world. She connects with nature. She connects with history, and her job at the counseling center really benefits from that experience, I think, in her life. And she's a little shy and a little secretive about her interests, but she comes along, she develops through the books and gains more self-confidence as she goes. I think it's important to me. The setting's very important to me. My books couldn't take place just anywhere. They have to be where they are. So I try very hard to recreate that world for my readers, to include a lot of details, which I have to research again, or I have to be there and take the pictures. But, I know what kind of wildlife lives there. I know what kind of trees grow there. I know, I know about their myths. I know about the history of the village and the history of the churchyard. And all that is important to the stories that I tell, because it all influences how they go and what happens in the books. So I don't know what to tell you other than that. Each one is different. I do try to vary the murders so they're not all the same. Some might be, you might have a murder of passion. You might have a serial killer. You might have somebody that wants an inheritance, so they kill somebody. Just I try to do something different in every one. So if I can tell you about the last one, yes, that one has a teenage boy who comes into the counseling center and confesses to a murder. And he has very vivid details about the location and the weapon and the victim and an eyewitness. But when they go to investigate, they can't find any of that. Nobody in the village knows anybody that looks like that eyewitness. Nobody's missing. There is no body. There's no evidence of blood or a weapon. So what, is he lying? And why would he do that? Or maybe he's having some kind of a mental breakdown and it makes him think he did it. Or maybe he actually did the crime and for some reason it's covered up. I don't know. That's the puzzle that they have to figure out in that book. And I like to always end with a little bit of philosophy. So, some kind of a philosophical idea that comes out in the last chapter. So I guess, I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah,
that's my goal.
we as readers love to hear what's in the mind of authors that we follow. So yes, that was wonderful. And I've got 1,000 questions, but I want everybody else to have first chance. So I'm going to tell folks, you can go ahead and unmute if you want. You can stay muted and wait and then just break in some point, but feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away. Just Annie.
I have a question for Janet. So you talked about the kind of metaphysical or the alternative world, but do you lead up to that? You start like in magical realism, they start with the realism, and then, or do you just go straight to the fairies and I think the alternative view.
No, well, there's a lead up to it. No, it
Okay.
doesn't just go straight into it. No, especially in the beginning. Bronwyn is very insecure about what she does with the other world characters or figures, I guess. I don't know what you call them. She has in the past, she's been sent to counseling because she's not sure if they're real or if she has, some kind of a psychosis going on. So she's very, very private about that part of her life and keeps it very, very secret. And she's really, even herself, she's not sure. She's just not sure. So, you can interpret that however you like as you go through the books. However, the clues that she comes up with from them do lead to a solve in the crime. So there has to be some kind of reality there.
Can I
But
just
it's-
follow up with Janet?
Sure.
Janet, I just wonder whether you've actually been to Wales, to that area.
I have. I have been there a couple times, several times, and spent quite a bit of time taking a lot of pictures and walking the footpaths and exploring the area. And yeah, yep. I wrote the first couple books before I went, and then I rewrote them totally when I came home because it's way different than I thought it would be. And I am in touch with people who live there. So if I have questions, specific questions, I have an old man named Tudor that I can I can message and he will answer my questions. So yeah, I've been there. I love it. It's just it's very, very remote, very rural, and just quaint. I love it. It's a nice place. And it has little funny things like when you drive up the road, there's pheasants that run all ahead of your car and they don't seem to think they can fly and they won't go through the hedgerows. So they're just right there. And I finally figured out that where they came from, it took me a long time, but I finally discovered that there was quite the controversy. Actually, they have a shooting estate up on the hillside and they raise those birds to hunt. And I didn't realize that, but there's quite a conflict with the church and the hunting estate because it really destroys the peace of the place that they're trying to create there. That I try to create in my books as well. So yeah, I've been there. I love it.
I have a question here for probably all three of you. If you want, Jerry says, oops, it just moved. Excuse me, I'm trying to get back to my characters all have some physical defect that is partly based on me. Do your characters also have certain physical or mental or emotional baggage they must overcome? Anybody want to speak to that?
I can jump in. My characters do definitely have, well, I already told you about Bronwyn and how she isn't sure whether what she sees is real or whether she has some kind of a problem, an issue that requires some counseling or medication or something. I don't know. Will also has baggage in that his transfer to North Wales Major Crimes was an unwilling transfer. He had been working undercover drugs and alcohol in Cardiff, and because his sister died of a drug overdose, they moved him, and he was not happy about that. And he also has some pretty major family issues, conflicts with his mother, especially an orphaned niece that he's very close to that his mother uses as leverage to get him to do things. So yeah, they have things going on in their lives. Not anything physical, I wouldn't say, but they do have things to work out. So go ahead, Chris, Elena.
I think you had Elena, you were.
Go ahead, Elena.
No, Chris, go ahead. I'll speak after you.
Okay. Major characters, yes, they have some sort of a character flaw or challenges that they're trying to deal with in each story. And I've written the books so that you can read them separately or in any order. But for the character development, it really does help to kind of read them in order. Rex Begonia, the primary character, um, is an introvert who doesn't like to work with people, and he is put in a situation where he has to mentor this young woman who's he finds annoying at first. And so over the course of their working together, he learns to work more as a team member and to be a good mentor. Ivy, his partner and mentee, has self-confidence issues. She's a young, very petite woman in a very male-dominated profession, and she has to learn how to be confident. So those are the kinds of things that, as characters, they're working on throughout the series.
And I'm going to answer it in a specific way, in a general way. The easy answer is yes, absolutely. And the specific way is, for example, in The Haunting of Emily Grace, even though it's a suspense novel and it's about a carpenter who she goes out to this mansion on this isolated island and all these strange things start to happen, and it follows that as a plot line, it is a book about grief. It is a book about overcoming grief. And I based her experiences and her emotional landscape and her arc on my own personal grief about a loss. So while the loss my character endures is not the same as the loss I endured, I used my own personal experiences to create that character. So those are the kinds of things that I do, and that's a very specific example. And then the general answer is all of my characters, I invest them, I hope successfully, I invest them with complexity. So they are all overcoming stuff, whether that is a past event, an experience with or a relationship, or some sort of shortcoming or confidence, whatever that is. So all of my characters have an arc where through the process of a particular story, they've learned something, or they have overcome something, or they have um, uh, taken something which is a challenge and made it successful by the end, however it works out for each individual character. And all of those are grounded in how I understand the world. So they're grounded in how I understand a particular situation, or how I understand an emotional, physical, or a mental health issue. So the easy answer is yes. Great question, Jerry. Thank you for that.
Any other questions from folks here? Annie?
Are you all traditionally published like with an agent that found you an editor, or do you go the independent publishing route?
I have an agent and I'm traditionally published.
Good.
I
Okay.
like to think that we're an eclectic group because we've all got different publishing backgrounds. Mine is I independently published mine through Amazon.
Mhm,
And
okay.
I've self-published mine, and that was a very conscious choice at the beginning. I had done some research into traditional publishing route and self-publishing, and I just, for myself, I thought it was a better route to go. And I still feel that way for what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, it seems like traditional publishing is kind of in trouble. I heard that Penguin has shut down the Dial imprint, which is just shut them down, like everybody go home. And even while that's happening, non-traditional publishing is rising and in esteem and awards and all kinds of things. So I appreciate you answering that.
Mine was a very conscious choice as well. I had read a lot of things about different ways of publishing, and I saw that authors were saying they liked the control they have over their books if they publish independently. And I wanted that too. So there you go.
I would just throw in that, don't, yes, Dial is gone, but that's been happening off and on for years. I mean, imprints come and imprints go. That's just change. It always occurs. So don't think too much about that. I have a couple of questions here in the chat. Ryan, I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly what you want here. Can you describe your research process regarding capturing existing, is the IRL?
In real life, I think he's just asking, how do we create the realism in our books when we're basing things in a genuine place? Is that correct, Ryan? That's how I read that question.
Janet talked about visiting.
Yes, he said yes. So I'll speak to that, and then Chris can as well, because we've kind of heard from Janet. But I set all of my stuff in places I know or visit. So in my first series, it's set in Bellingham. It's real places. If a crime takes place or something violent happens, you'll know that it is fictional. I've created a fictional restaurant or a fictional, cross street or a building. If it's not a crime happening, I'm using real places in Bellingham. My Sheriff Bet Rivers series is set in a fictional town, but it's sort of a combination of North Bend and Roslyn, Washington. So it takes elements of those. Everything is very real in terms of how it's grounded. And then Haunting of Emily Grace is set in an isolated island out in the San Juans, and it is very accurate to how those islands are. But I've had people say they really want to visit the island. I am afraid to say it isn't real, but you could go to like Orcas and hang out in East Sound, and there would have a lot of similarities. So it's places I go, it's places I know, it's places that I can do research on to make them accurate. Chris, yours are all grounded in Spokane. Are we going to catch you creating real places or fictional?
Well, I do have an advantage that Spokane is right here, but I do actually research in person, like in High Stakes at Hoop Fest. There's a scene that takes place in underground Spokane, and I have actually visited that as part of my research. I volunteered at Hoop Fest to get a feel for it and to learn more about it. So I do things like that. I also have a good friend who is a retired homicide detective here in Spokane who reads through my work, just like Elena has a friend do the same thing. And then I also have a very odd reading list, like, books about murder and, police procedural type of things like weapons. And I mean, I would be embarrassed to have someone come in and look at some of the books on my shelves because I would be a suspect.
Right there with you, Chris. So I've got Forensics for Dummies, I think is over there on my shelf, and Homicide Investigative Techniques.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got all that kind of stuff in my bedroom. What is that? I don't write. Question here from Megan. Do you feel like you skip over lots of hassle with independent publishing?
Maybe Elena, you might want to, you've done both, haven't you?
Well, no, sort of. My novels are all traditionally published.
Okay.
The only two things that are self-pubbed is I have some craft books, and those are just have a very different purpose. Because
Yeah.
I'm a developmental editor as well, and I work professionally as a developmental editor. I have two craft books that I put out to be available really for my clients, for people who are sort of interested. But I would never self-publish a novel, so I can't speak to that.
I think there's pros and cons to going both routes, and you really have to choose what's best for you. The reason I chose to self-publish is because I had heard from people who traditionally published at the length of time that it took them to get a book published. and I mean, they were talking about 6 to 12 years. And I'm starting when I retired. And I was thinking, well, that's a drawback. So that was one thing. And then also, I was hearing from folks that he's still had a lot of work to do on the promotional end. And unless you already were well established as an author. And I thought, well, I'm going to be paying and money anyway. I'm going to be doing this work anyway. I would like to have the control. I like I choose the artwork for the cover. I've chosen a local artist. I've chosen a local printer to help do some of the formatting and printing of the print copies. And some of that goes to my values of community, and partly why I write about stories that take place. Then I also want to support the community. So, but if I wanted a much broader audience, like I do have books on Amazon so that people far away can purchase books. I also have it on Ingram Spark, so other places can get it printed. But if I wanted a much broader audience, then maybe I would try the traditional route.
And Chris, I want to follow up on something you said that I think sometimes readers, or authors, excuse me, that sometimes writers get confused about, when we talk about the promotional side of things. So I just want to throw out there that one of the huge differences between traditionally publishing, regarding the size of your publisher, traditional publishing and self-publishing, is that yes, authors do have to participate in promotions, but you have to remember that when you're traditionally published, your book is already going out in a catalog to all the bookstores. Your book is already going out to Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and the reviews. Your publisher is doing all of that. And much of that isn't even available to a self-pub author. So when people say, and I'm not, this isn't that Chris is wrong, I'm just adding in a different perspective, which is that when people say, well, wait a minute, if I'm traditionally published, I have to do promotions too, I should just self-pub. It's like, well, not exactly, right? I'm already way far ahead as a traditionally published author in terms of promotions happening, and everything I do adds on to that. If I was just self-published, everything is on me in terms of promotions, and I'm terrible at promotions. So that's part of why I go the traditional route, is because I want to have that leg up with what my publisher's already going to be doing for me before I even start. So that's just something that I wanted to clarify, because sometimes people think, well, if I have to do promotions anyways, traditional isn't helping me. And it's like, yeah, you're in the catalogs, you're in the libraries, you're in the, the bookstores know your book is coming out. So it's just a little bit of a different starting place.
And I wanted to throw something in there too, you guys, because I think over the years I've watched and talked to different people, it's important that you decide, or that you know what you're doing up front. Once you're happy to your writing, it's a little late to be jumping all over the because friends want your work if it's too far, it's confusing. Your best bet, I think, is to do all the research you need to do. Talk to other authors, find what went right, find out what went wrong, see what's missing, what you're going to have to do yourself, and then make your decision where you want to go.
Linda, I so agree. And Chris and Janet were so smart to know what they wanted out of their writing and their books and their availability. And they did the research and they knew that was the route they wanted to go. And I think that's great. I wish that all self-pubbed authors would do that research and know that before they start down that road, thinking that it's going to take them into traditional publishing, which isn't how it works. So I think it's super smart on both their parts.
I don't think you got a chance to say anything there, Janet, on that, or did you?
Oh, I'm just listening. They're all, I mean, everything they're saying is right on. And I think, keep in mind that for me, I'm a hobby writer. I don't need to sell, thousands and thousands of books. So, I did what I
Yeah.
what worked for me. You know, it works for me. And it's true, you have to promote your own books, and you're not going to get them in libraries and bookstores just automatically. But, you know, I still get my royalty checks every month, and I'm happy about that. And I have international readers, and I'm happy about that. So, you know, for me, it worked out. I write in a genre that's very popular, and I think that helps a lot. I know people that write memoirs and things, and they don't sell any books, and they think, oh, why? Well, you know, I think you have to kind of, you know, think about what you're doing, and everybody's situation is unique, and so what works for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there it is.
Don't anybody think I'm not trying to cover you up for no reason.
Yeah, there we are.
I would like to add something else too, in that a lot of people choose to self-publish because they want to maintain control. And you had asked about hassles. I think it's really important, if you self-publish, that you still get feedback, and that you are very open to making changes and to listening to that feedback. Um, I actually changed the book cover on my last book because of some feedback from Linda and others. And so I think it might seem like you do have more control, but you really do need to pay attention to that.
Well, I can send this graphic out to anybody requested. This thing is huge. I'm going to have to shrink it. Believe it or not, this is like 10% of its size. When I created it today, it was, wow. So, but if anybody wants this info, I can either send this or I can just send the information that's on it. But while it's on the screen, if anybody wants to just kind of check it out, for what there is each person's name, of course, and their email address, so you can contact them if you've got questions that pop into your mind. Oh, I forgot to ask this. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. And then there is a link for each person. Are you not seeing it, Chris?
Well, I thought I saw Joan's hand go up
and
when
that and she can go ahead and unmute and talk to you. I'm just saying this is on the screen for people to make notes now if they wish.
I was just going to mention that there's also a difference in the money the author gets in self-publishing and traditional publishing. You know, I traditionally published my first memoir, and I was surprised how little you get. And if you have an agent, you get even less. And if you self-publish, yeah, you have on your back to do all the marketing and stuff, but you also get more per book. So to me, it kind of evens out.
Yeah, I think the three things that stand out to me as your choices that you end up having to make is to look thoroughly at the cost and what you make off of your book. That includes, you know, the actual cost, because you're going to have to pay for marketing if you do any marketing. So there's always that. The other is control, because you do in fact have the artistic control when you're self-publishing or publishing, you know, on your own, as opposed to through a traditional publishing house. And seems like there was another one. Oh yeah, marketing. How much work you're going to have to do. So, and are you able to do the marketing? Those three things, I think, really are the underlying things that you have to determine for yourself, because they're all different.
Linda, I have a question of you. When you're looking at books to buy, does whether they're self-published or traditional have any part in your decision?
Me personally,
Yeah.
I would likely not buy a self-published book unless I knew the author.
Okay.
Because if I know the author, then I know the likely quality of that book. Now,
Mhm.
if I've had another author tell me, you ought to really, this is a great thing, you ought to read this and that, then I will take their advice. But no, out of the millions of books coming out, there's no way I'm not gonna. Frankly, I won't trust whatever Amazon says because they're just there. So I expect to know the author or know the referral. I know the kind of vetting that goes into traditional authorship. Um, Boy, do I know that vetting. That they spend. That's why it takes so long. The editors work hard to make sure that the author's book is tip top, so that it
Mm.
can compete in the marketplace. Because one of the things that I think everybody ought to think about is you can get a book out there, but is the reader ever going to come back? And you've got to grab them. And your book has to be excellent, and then they'll come back and want your next book and your next book. But if your first book is poorly done or doesn't reflect quality, they're never going to look at you again. It's just the facts of competition.
Yeah. And the dreaded DNF, right? If somebody does not finish your book, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is. And because I work with book clubs so much, you see, I hear what readers think of books. And I would suggest, and I do, to every single author, you need to be in at least one book club. You need to what readers look for in a good book, or what they consider a good book. It makes all the I am so surprised at what I hear in as I lead, because I'm sitting there just listening to them, and they talk about, well, everything was fine except the first 3 chapters. I didn't know what the heck was going on, and I didn't. The only reason I ended up finishing it was because it's the group I wanted to do. So they suffered through that book in order to meet what they felt was an obligation to the members of the. And
Yeah.
instead, I would never read it again, never again. This author. Others would say, they're in the group and they say, until I was in the group, I never would have picked up a book like this because I thought this book was about X based on the cover. And that's not what it was about. And I discovered a new book, an author that I like. This is great. So, I mean, they can give you an education that you will never get anywhere else in the industry.
Yeah, I think the covers really sell a book so much. That's so important. The covers.
Yeah.
Paul has a question.
Yo, Paul.
Just a simple one. I'm a fairly good writer, but I'm terrible at promotion. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what works. If somebody would look at my promotion, they would not pick up my book. So that puts me into a dilemma, either hire somebody to do the promotion or get better at it myself, or just have fun.
There you go.
Yeah, I think you have to ask, what do you want out of this? If you're wanting a lot of sales, then you're gonna have to think about a different way of doing what you're doing. If you're just enjoying writing and you like to have your books available, you don't need to change anything. You're doing what you want to do. So I think it fundamentally comes down to what you want, what makes you happy, what your goals are.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because promotions are expensive, and from the author's side of things, that you can't necessarily have a huge impact anyways. Writers only have so much control, Writers can only do so much marketing, and their marketing has only so much outreach, and it only has so much impact, right? And we were talking about library books, right? Thousands of libraries in the US. If your book is getting into libraries, you're almost guaranteed thousands of sales, right? And the author's not doing that. The publisher's doing that, right? So if you don't have that available to you, you could spend thousands of dollars in promotions. It's not going to change your library sales at all because you can't get into the library that way. And so again, you could spend thousands of dollars and not necessarily see a big spike in your sales because of what is available to you as a writer. So I think, if you love writing and you're enjoying it and your books are doing what you're doing, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd do what you're doing.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yep,
Janet agrees.
I do. Because that's what I do,
No.
you know?
Looks like you still have a
Yeah,
question.
Paul, you can follow up.
Yeah, well, I just make a comment that somebody told me when I started that self-publishing is automatically poor writing. And I think at that time, it was absolutely true. I think maybe it's different nowadays, but not that much different.
Depends on the writer. Depends on
Yeah,
their process. It depends on have they worked with an editor, have they had good beta
right.
readers.
And if it's promoted properly.
Well,
And if
promotion
it,
doesn't change
and
the
if,
quality,
yeah,
right? Promotion doesn't change quality, right?
No.
well,
10,
but
15 years
quality doesn't change promotion either. So
10
we
or
got to
15
have
years
both.
ago, when people were just starting to do, at a good flow, self-publishing, there was not the training that is available now. There was not there weren't the editors, the marketing specialists that could teach you what to do. But in terms of quality, all you people had was, I could trust me at the bookstore since 2001, 15 years ago. I saw people coming in and they wanted their books on. They'd come in, can we do a signing? We'll do a signing. People bought their books. People came back and said, I will never go. And they would stand at the author's table and say, is this published? How was this published? They started asking because they'd been burned. And they said, I will never buy another self-published book because they were crap. And that was solely because everybody who wanted to write decided, I want to be a writer and I can write and I've got a story and I'm going to tell it. And they just sat down and wrote it and then put it out. And it was horrible. Nobody else wanted to read that story. And so, but we've gone 10, 15 years down the road and people are now learning how to do it. Now I say self-published books are excellent in most cases. Most, not just some, but most. There's still the trash. There are still readers who buy off of a very large site who are looking for specific kinds of books. I'm avoiding naming genres or anything else. And they really don't, they're not choosy. They don't care. They want a titillating book that's just going to make them giggle and tee hee because somebody's talking about sex or whatever. They don't care about quality. And yes, you can sell to them and you can write trash and they'll buy it and fine. But if you really want to say something to the world, it matters what you put out there. And then you have to fight for the space because the world's got a lot of trash readers, but there's not that many now that really like good stories. I mean, they're there, but you have to find.
That's why I think it's so important to, if you are self-publishing, to enter a couple of contests, get that feedback from people who don't know you before you proceed with sinking a lot of time and money into publishing. I've had to reprint my books. They're still selling. So they're self-published and they're doing fine. I don't know, I'm probably not selling many in Chicago, Illinois, but I'm selling a lot in our community.
I don't know, according to all the scammers emails I'm getting, evidently the book that I never wrote is just they're in love with it on Amazon, and they want me to go on all sorts of programs and do stuff. They only want me to give them $5,000-$6,000
Yeah.
altogether for this. No, I'm just making a joke, Chris, because I don't know what else to
I
say.
would say,
Hi,
can I just pop in quick and say that if you're a reader and you're looking at a self-published book, read the reviews.
Yeah.
The reviews are going to tell you if that book is garbage or if it's good. And a lot of books have a lot of reviews. So I even with famous authors now, I read the reviews because I know some of them just don't have the skill anymore. I guess I want to say, I don't know. I've read some very famous authors who kind of dropped the ball. So now I read the reviews on every book I buy.
but
And
the caveat, Janet, is because I write reviews. The caveat is, how do you know I'm telling you the truth about the book? How do
well,
you
when you get a
you're
large
right,
number of them, I always read the worst ones. That's what I do.
How do you
I
know
drop down to the 1 stars if there are any, 1 or 2 stars. What didn't they like?
because people don't like the same thing, for one thing, and
Yeah.
they write a book. So the worst thing somebody can do is do a review that is misleading in the sense of this book
Yeah.
is a great romance book, and yet there's no romance in it. Or this book is a thrilling ride, blah blah, and there's no thrills. Or it's, this or that. In your
Right.
case, be like this wonderful mystery that takes place in the UK, but it's not even in the UK. I mean, this is stuff that you see happening all the time. And yes, it disappoints readers tremendously. So you're absolutely right. And I always tell people, go out, sample a few reviewers, find one that you talk the same language. And then from then on, look for their review, because then you know what you're going to get. It's more of what they already introduced you to. So we're running over. You can stick around as long as you want, but just want you to know that.
I just want to say on behalf of Elena, Chris, and I, thank you, Linda, for inviting us to do this today. And we love you. You are Spokane's greatest treasure.
You are.
Because I'll tell you what, there is nobody anywhere that does what you do for readers and writers in their community. You are just amazing, and we love you to pieces. So thank you. Thank you.
I heat rising. I am. Thank
I
you.
have to add something to that. You do it well.
She does.
Thank you, Paul.
But I think it takes a lot of effort to do it that well. And, she does it.
Writing. I love the power of the word. I love the fact that you people change the world. You change people's lives. You introduce them to things they hadn't thought about. That is one of the most powerful, wonderful things we can do for our society, for our community. So yeah, I'll do everything I can to support you till I drop. And thanks everybody for coming here today. We appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
And I can send you follow-ups. Just write me if there's something missing, something you want, whatever. Okay?
Okay.
Yay.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you,
What is
Linda.
it? Rest of the week?
Thank you.
I don't know. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Linda.
And thank you, Chris and Janet. I always love hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, there's going to be time for another coffee date here
I
soon.
think so.
I think so.
I think so.
Find,
Bye-bye.
find your writing friends.